Hello guys, this is DM Developer, and today we will begin our third part of this CSS tutorial. And today we will be talking about the CSS units as well as the four properties to deal with the CSS units. That is height, width, max width, and max height and max width. And in the end of the video, I'll talk more about CSS selectors. And to end that chapter, we will be talking about specificity. So let's jump right into it. So today we will be starting by learning CSS units, and for that we will be first learning for properties, that is width, height, and max height and max width. For that, I'll just clean up our page first. Let's take this here. Let's make, for example, green, so you can see our section better. And let's take our background out. Okay. First, let me just take also a few lines of our example text. Okay, like so. And now let's go to section here. And well, let's learn the first property, that is width. And in width, you usually have here a length, and this length can take any of the CSS units I'm now going to tell you about. So first you have the absolute length, and in the absolute length you can really specify the width or the height of the section or the container you are in. And really specifying this length, it is better used when, for example, you are doing an HTML page for a CV, and imagine you want to print your CV in an A4 sheet. Well, if you use, for example, let's say A4 sheet have as 15 centimeters. I know I know it should be bigger, but yeah, you can say 15 centimeters, and then you'll see that the width will be exactly 15 centimeters when printed to a physical page, to the A4 sheet you will be printing this on. And well, that's just one. You can also use millimeters, and you'll see, yeah, it will be much smaller. And you can also use 15 inches. This will be quite big. And of course, you have the normal unit used to the HTML pages, and that is pixels. You'll see that 15 pixels is also quite thin, but here, if you come and do, for example, 200 pixels, you will see that this section will have exactly 200 pixels in width. So after pixels, we have two more absolute lengths to learn, and one of them is the point. I will put here in a comment that 1 point is exactly 1 divided by 72 inches. So, for example, if I come here to points and put 72, and let's imagine we want our section to be a square. This will be quite a small square, but you will know what I'm telling you about. Oh, I'm sorry. This isn't commented, like so. So you will see now that this section is an exact square, because 72 points is 1 inch. And well, if it has the same height and the same width, it is a square. So let's delete this and put here in width, for example, I don't know, 500 points. And you can use this measure because it is really precise. So if you are dealing with small elements and you want it to be just right, you can use this points length to make it as perfect as you want your section or your container to be. After points, we have I'll put here in the comments, APC, sorry, PC, and APC is 12 points. So here, let's imagine you have a width of 44, okay, like so, and now you want a height of 12 PC. Here I miss the point. You will see that this is a square also, because well, 12 times 12 is 144. So these are the same measurements, the same length. So it will be yet again a square. So yeah, these are the absolute length you need to know. And well, I don't usually really use this. I use relative length. But as I said, if you are dealing with exact measurements for your website, you should use this length. So now let's go to relative length, and we'll start, for example, with the width of 15 EM. You'll see that EM is a length relative to the font size of the element. So here in section, these are 15 EMs because the section has the same font size as the root element of this HTML file. So if I come here and have a bigger size of, for example, 200%, the font size of the root element, you will see that the width of this section will also be bigger, because the font size now is different from the font size of the root element of this HTML5. So now we have another one, and that is EX. So here, if I put EX, delete the font size, now you will see, I'm sorry, yeah, like that, that EX is a length relative to the X height of the current font. This is quite rarely used, but basically, instead of just looking at the font size, it will look at the height of the font you are writing in. So, for example, here, if we have a font that is 2 times bigger than the font from the root element, you will see that this 15 EX of length will also stay bigger. It will quite stay almost the double of what it was before. Okay, now let's go to another relative length, and that will be CH. Well, CH is also regarding the font size, but now it doesn't look at all the fonts you are writing in. It is a length relative only to the width of the 0 character. So the 0 character, like so. Here, if you, I'm sorry, we'll reload it first. And now if I can double the size of the font again to 100%. You will see that this will also be bigger, because if we are writing in a bigger font size, the size of the character 0 will also be bigger. So because it is relative to that size, this 15ch will mean a bigger width than previously. Okay, after that we have rem. And this is quite alike the EM, but it has a thing that is different, and that is that the RAM, the ERM, doesn't regard the font size of the actual element. It will only regard the font size of the root element. So here, if I put twice the font size than before, you will see that the font size will be bigger, but the width didn't change at all, because the font size of the root element is still the same. So this is a length that is quite used, because it's a relative length, and you can add a lot of styles to your HTML file, but because you don't really change the style of the root element so many times, this measurement will be relative, but it will still be absolute if you don't change the size of the font size of the root element. So yeah, after this we have two others, and that is VW. And VW is the length relative to 1% of the width of the viewport. Well, if you don't know what the viewport is, you can just go and try to figure it out, because we talked about that in the HTML tutorial. Like so. After VW, we have VH, and this, instead of being relative to the width of the viewport, it will be relative to the height of the viewport. So you'll see that because our viewport is bigger than our width of the viewport, you will see that this will also be bigger than the VW. So after that, we have just another one, and that isn't a length, but is a value that you can give to the width property, and that is auto. Well, auto, what it does is that it is the default value for the width property, and well, it just adjusts the width of the element you are in to the size of the elements you have inside that element. So here we are talking about our section, and then we are talking about the elements that are inside the section. So the heading element and the paragraph element, and the auto just adjusts the width to the width of the section according to the width that you need to render these paragraphs and these headings. We have yet another one that isn't a unit, but is also a way to define the height or the width of your element, and that is the percentage. What the percentage does is that it will go to the parent element of the element you are selecting, and it will say that the width of this element you are selecting is a percentage of the width of the parent element. So, for example, here our section is inside our main, and well, we can see that the main is occupying the whole width of the screen. So now, if we give it a width of 50%, it will only occupy half of the screen. So if we reload it, there you have it. And well, if you want 3/4 of the width of the screen, then 75% will do it. This is also a way to define the size of elements or any other thing that is quite used nowadays. And that's about it for defining width and height. So we missed the max width, and what the max width does is that it tells that the section can have the maximum width available for the length you are specifying, the value you give to this property. So let's, for example, here say that our width is 15 em, and our max width is 15 rem. Okay, now let's say, for example, that here in the section you alter the font size to 200% of the size of the root element. You will see that it should get bigger, but because our max width is saying that the max width can only be 15 rem, that's accordingly to the font size of our root element. The 15 em should get bigger, but they won't get any bigger because the max width is already defined. Well, the same goes for max height, so I won't be talking about that because, well, it's the same, just instead of horizontally, it's vertically. So let's delete this. And now let me tell you a bit more about CSS specificity for selectors. So now we will be learning the specificity, and that will make us conclude about the CSS selectors and how to use them. So basically what you need to know is that there is an hierarchy to how you select the elements, and remember the question I told you about that these subtitles stayed with the background in blue, and the other elements stayed with the background of black. Well, that is precisely because of specificity, so let's learn more about it. So there are very simple ways to calculate the specificity and calculate the outcome of what your style will look like in your index file. So let's start with the top of the hierarchy, and that is the inline style. So let's see, for example, here in section we are telling it that the background should be white, selecting element. So let's see what happens when you change the style by adding a inline style. So you can come here, specify the property style, and here you can write your CSS code, and I will write the background, and I will say that the background should be, I don't know, for example, pink. Well, even though we are selecting here with the element, we are now here selecting with a inline CSS. So because that is on top of our hierarchy, you will see that the browser disregards this selector and only looks at the inline style that we give to our element, and so it will override our style selected here by the style selected here, and it will be the section will take the color of pink, the background color of pink. So after inline in the hierarchy, I will put a comment here so you can follow this better. We first have our inline CSS, and this inline CSS is applied as here in our section. And after the inline CSS, we have the IDs. We already talked about IDs also. So here, let's delete this. We'll see that our background will go back to white. And here, let's give it an ID that can be sec for section. And here, we won't be deleting this, but we will add our selector, but instead of selecting the element, we will select the ID. And now we can copy this and change the color to pink. And you will see that because this selector is also above in the hierarchy, above this selecting only element, you will see that this background will also turn pink. once again, the browser will discard the first selector and will only look at our ID selector because it is higher in the hierarchy. So yeah, after inline IDs, and after IDs classes. And well, once again, we can come here and put, for example, sec, and now we are selecting a class sec and not an ID. And because there doesn't exist any class defined here as sec in our HTML file, you'll see that this will turn back to white. And now if we come here and instead of ID give it a class of sec, you will see that it will happen again. And now it disregards yet again this selector and regards only the class selector because yet again it is above in the hierarchy. So after classes we finally have elements. And yeah, elements is the normal selection we are using now, like so. And you have yet another way to select things, to select elements, and that way is through pseudo classes. So I will leave a few links in the description that will tell you more about the pseudo classes and also the pseudo elements that we will be learning just a little bit about it now. So you have the pseudo classes first, and that is, for example, here writing double dots and then over, and you'll see that the background disappeared. But what this means is that when you have your mouse above the section, over the section, it will turn the background color into white. So if I come here and come with my mouse above the section, you'll see that it will turn the background color to white. So that's how you define pseudo classes, and the pseudo classes come right here. And you have a few other ones, but as I said, I will leave a link in the description, so if you want to learn them even further. So after the pseudo classes, you have the pseudo elements. And the pseudo elements are quite like this, but in a bit of a different way. And that is, for example, for the piece, we'll select a background color of pink. And you'll see that all the paragraphs are now with a background color of pink. But you can just want, for example, the first letter of your paragraph with this background color of pink. To do that, you add double dots twice, and then select first letter, and then there only the first letters of all the paragraphs are now with the background color of pink. And these pseudo elements come right here in our hierarchy elements, like so. Okay, now there are a lot of ways, as I told you before, to calculate this, but I found that the best way is to just give it numbers. So, for example, you want to calculate after a few selectors the specificity of one and the other. You can, anytime you see a inline CSS, add add 1,000 to the value of that, the specificity of that element, that selector. And when you see an ID, you add 100. When you see a class, you add 10. And when you see an element, you add just 1. And now you'll see that this works for, well, any kind of selection you are trying to give to your CSS. So here we have our section, and now we will add an ID to our section, or a class, because it is already there. So sec, and it will override the background color to pink, as we saw this earlier. And well, let's calculate the specificity of one and the other. So this starts at 0, and then you see that in our selector we have a element. So as we saw here, we will add just one unit. That means it will stay like this. But then we go here to our second selector, and to calculate this we will have 4 zeros, and then we'll add, because this is a class, and you see here that class only adds 10. You'll see here that instead of 0 you have 10. So you'll see that this number is bigger than this one, so this has a bigger specificity than this selector. So because it has a bigger specificity, it will be the one that renders in your HTML file. And well, I will link the links in the descriptions, and you also have a lot of specificity calculators online, where you can just copy all your selectors, paste, and then it will calculate these numbers by itself and tell you. And you can use that when you have big style sheets in CSS, and you start to get confused on the specificity of your selectors, and just paste everything there, and it will tell you the specificity of the selectors you are choosing. So that will be it for this video. I hope you understood everything well, and yeah, that's it. If this video helped you, don't forget to like and subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.